So, good afternoon, Raquel.
Hi, Anna.
So just to introduce Raquel, Raquel is a nervous system specialist of the highest degree, I would say, who uses mind-body medicine to help her clients experience wholeness from within. And just a bit of background, I have worked with you as a client, and I remember some of the exercises were it felt like they were sort of messing with my brain, but they weren't.
Yes.
They would, yeah, but I don't need to go into that, but it really did benefit me. So thank you for that. And then last year I did a course with Raquel, which was this beautiful combination of nervous system work and shamanism, and just amazing. So thank
Yeah,
you.
I love that course. That's my expansion training. I love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And all the effort and love you put into it really shows. So thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Okay, so just to start with, because everybody is familiar with the term nervous system, but maybe not everybody knows what it means. I think most people would understand fear, fight, flight, and that's a typical nervous system response as far as I know. Am I
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, all right. So everybody's familiar with that, but do we need to know a little bit more before we go further into your work?
Yeah, I think I was giving that some thought, and I think one of the really simple things that we need to know is that the nervous system uh, provides these patterns, these survival responses, right? It provides our biology with this opportunity to have survival responses. And they're perfectly healthy, perfectly natural, perfectly biologically normal. However, sometimes those patterns of survival can become, let's say, patterns of protection that get in the way of connection. Okay, and really that's to drill it down to its more kind of simple and applied thing is if we're so occupied with our survival, then we actually miss out on the other opportunity within our nervous system, which is connection.
Yeah.
So we're actually biologically primed for connection just as much as we're biologically primed for survival. But if those patterns of survival keep overriding our intentions and our impulses to connect, we end up losing the more, let's say, awakened and evolved aspects that are potential within our nervous system.
And that would become a vicious cycle as well, I can imagine, because
It
I
can.
remember when I first became a mum, I would say I was in deep survival mode for years.
Mm.
Plus, I was feeling really lonely and isolated, and I didn't realize they were connected, but you've just joined some dots there.
Mm. Some people even outside of that, Anna, some people even experience it like addiction. So there's actually there can become a physiological addiction to the particular charge, let's say, that's within the body. So whilst we're not really addicted to the survival mode, because I think that kind of starts pathologizing the human, we can actually become physiologically or biologically addicted to the charge or the activation that's within the nervous system when we're in fight or flight in particular.
Yeah, and would that be like adrenaline?
Yeah, it can be. It can be so, so it can look like, then you could end up with behaviours that look like, either exercise addiction or food addiction, even trying to actually modulate some of that charge when you need to go to sleep, right? So let's say you're addicted to the charge, you've got that, let's say 20 hours a day or 18 hours a day or whatever it is, and then you need to get some rest. So how do you get some rest? Maybe you eat a lot to calm your system enough to kind of throw you into a little bit of a coma to make you go to sleep. But what you actually don't get is real rest and digest, which is the other part of the nervous system that needs this particular nourishment. And it's a particular type of genuine rest and digest that can't be had if you just collapse.
And I wonder also about the rest factor. I imagine it wouldn't be as good if you have a full belly.
No, no, it isn't, because, well,
Maybe.
I think, yeah, well, the nervous system is designed to digest, but in that rest and digest phase. But I think it is a little bit too much for the nervous system to be doing both those things, right? Yeah. But they are actually in the same branch, so that was why I had to hesitate then, because they're in the same branch, so they're not they're not nervous system opposed. But from a physiological perspective, I think it is too heavy on the nervous, or too heavy on the digestive system to be trying to rest and digest.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think it's too much for your body, and then do you not get the same quality of rest?
And that would be something to consider or to ask, definitely, is what kind of quality of rest do you get when you're also digesting? Is it like, for example, and because I don't know the answer to this, Anna, is it like you have to, once you complete the phase of digestion, then you can move into a deeper phase of rest, right? And that may be the case. You're going to muscle test it.
I've got to know.
Yeah, see, there you go. And it may not be. That's what I'm saying, is it is along the same branch of the nervous system.
Mm.
No, so from a nervous system perspective, I'm saying they both can operate together.
Mm.
And your muscle testing kind of
confirm that. Yep.
There you go.
Muscle test. Thank you, Raquel.
So there's a difference, right? We can make all those kinds of assumptions about what seems logical and whatever, but there is actually science that we can really follow on the nervous system.
And it's worthwhile following it too, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think I heard years ago that you're more likely to not have nightmares, maybe, on a full belly.
There used to be
an old wives' tale.
There used to be an old wives' tale around not being able to eat cheese. Cheese before, or shouldn't eat cheese before bed.
Isn't that true?
No, it's not true. I believed it for years too, though, by the way. So, but I recently found out that there was absolutely no science behind it whatsoever.
And it's interesting because if you have milk, that actually induces sleep.
Yeah.
And cheese is dairy, so it makes sense that it's not true.
Yeah, could be.
Okay. All right. So just bringing you back to the forgiveness path.
Yeah.
Because, I haven't taken you on it yet, but that's why I'm doing this.
That's where we're going.
Yeah. But we're getting there. So can you tell me how forgiveness relates to our nervous system?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing to say is that if you're not able to forgive, that means that you're not there yet, and that there are some processes that you need to go through to get there. Now, just as there may be, heart processes or journaling processes or other processes that you need to get there, there are some nervous system processes you also need to go through to get there. It means you're not in the appropriate nervous system state that is aligned with forgiveness, which happens to be what we would say is what we would call is safe and social. It's the ventral vagal branch of the nervous system, and it's where you can be safely connected without fearing other members of your own species. So that's safe and social. Okay, yeah. And if you're not in safe and social, you don't have a nervous system availability for forgiveness.
Fascinating.
Right. So that means that you must be in fight, flight, or freeze if you're not able to forgive. Right? There must be some kind of sympathetic charge and some incomplete self-protection response associated with the event that you're trying to work through to forgiveness about or would like to. That means that there's some things that have not been completed yet.
Yeah.
By the nervous system and by the biology and the physiology. So when I talk about completion, there may be completion needed by the body that might be in the form of arms and legs being mobilized in some way for protection. But it could be as simple as turning the head, right? That could be the thing that didn't happen that needed to happen to be able to complete
Wow.
the event, so that the nervous system can move out of protection and into connection, right? So that's the process that's required, is we have to identify, oh, we're not ready for connection yet because the nervous system is still in protection.
Yeah. And I can say that from an emotional point of view too. So
Absolutely.
when people are in what I call lack of forgiveness or unforgiveness, they could be so angry with the other person. And I've got a friend in mind who I'm talking about now, and it's a combination between being so angry and so hurt by her sister and her sister's husband-in-law. And the behavior of those two is not great at all. You know, I'm always, when I'm on the phone to her, I'm, oh, did they, you know, and it's like that. And I can see she has an emotional response. She has a physical response because she's anxious, and that's anxiety is nervous system as well, is it?
Yes, it's usually the flight part of the nervous system. Sympathetic still.
Yeah. And did I say physical response? Yeah. So physical, emotional, and nervous system response to the lack of forgiveness. And I keep gently sort of saying, I think what might help you, because you can't control their behavior by any means or make them suddenly become upstanding citizens. But I think, in my opinion, is that forgiveness.
So what the question would be for this particular person is, what does your body want to happen to feel like it, that to help feel like the event is over?
Good one.
Right? So, and it's not from the mind. It's like, so that's why embodiment work is so important, because if you ask that question to someone who's not embodied, they're not going to be able to answer that question, right? But if we're in some way connected to our body in some way, then we might be able to, and that's the role of the therapist after the assistance with embodiment. The role of the therapist might be to say, oh, I just noticed your shoulder move a little bit to the right. Did you notice that? And they're like, yeah, actually my head seemed to go along with it, you know. And the therapist might say, well, would you be interested in tracking that? Right? And so then you get to track it and even notice as it moves together. And then what might arise from that tracking and being present with that small movement is something else may happen.
Yeah.
Right? And it may be nothing to do with the head and the neck. It may be they turn around and say, my foot just jumped.
Yeah.
Right? And then you go, well, that's interesting. How does that feel? And they're like, I'd like to do that again, actually. So then you actually have a potential self-protective response that the body has shown its way to.
Wow. That's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
So would you say, because you asked what would make the body feel safe for my friend?
Yes, it's like, what would make it feel like that event was over?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's it, over. Yeah. So it wouldn't be her logical brain saying, I want an apology, damn it.
Yeah.
No,
well, there's a start. So actually, and so just as you said that, right, I got that sense of, I want an apology, damn it, foot stamp.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So maybe that's the entry point to the embodiment piece. And so it might not be the completion piece, right? But it may be the entry point to being able to be in their body, to notice their body, to feel the something that happens in their body when they stamp their foot. And then from that, something else would probably likely happen.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So it's part experimental and part intuitive. So you're feeling to something that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
But you know, like you and I both felt into the foot stamp, right? We could like, no, that's
hips.
Yeah, right. Okay. And so then you say, can we maybe just try that out? Like, does that feel okay to just simply feel what it's like to put your hands on your hips?
Yeah, fantastic.
Quite right. Okay, well, what does or what might, or if you knew, that's the other thing, if you knew what the answer would be, what would your body want if you knew, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, because people will often say, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, well, if you did know,
Yeah.
what might the answer be?
Mm.
What part of the body might want to move? Do you have is there some kind of whisper, a hint of a movement or a desire to move? Because we don't even have to move, but is there an impulse somewhere, a flicker of an impulse somewhere that's happening in the body that feels like we could just pay attention to it? Because once we pay attention together, then it's more likely that something's going to happen.
Yeah. So would you say that the answers to helping our nervous system all lie in the body? The body?
They all lie in completion of experience, and some of that completion is physical. I also believe some of that completion is energetic.
Yeah.
So we can repeat patterns, let's say behavioural patterns, where like, oh my God, I've attracted the same man again, or I have those issues with my mother all my life, and now I'm having it with my best friend. Now I'm having it with the lady down the road. Now I'm having it with my child's best friend's mother, you know, like what is this, right? So there is, for what my attention goes towards is, there is an incomplete energy pattern, right?
Yeah.
That is actually trying to get our attention so that it completes itself.
Yeah.
Right? And so rather than us saying like eradicate it or clear it, which I know other modalities do, I like to think of it as a completion. Right? And so often we see those completion patterns in the body, but I think with things like, you know, emotional abuse or even childhood PTSD, then you have to think a little bit more broadly beyond the physical and beyond the body. And also from the perspective of what feels expansive and what feels contracting.
Yeah.
Right? So hence why I have the expansion training, because that's what we really want to be paying attention to, is what part of our body and how does it feel to expand towards something. Now, in the state of forgiveness, we would know that expansion is possible.
Yeah.
So if we are feeling expansive towards the person who we would like to forgive, or we feel we should forgive, then we're probably there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means we're probably in safe and social, right? So we're probably connected to ourselves, we're connected to something bigger than ourselves, and we're also connected to the vulnerability that we are capable of wounding that person in the same way that they have wounded us.
Yeah.
Right? That's where that connection and the expansiveness comes from. And now we can't, if we're not in safe and social, we can't hold that truth about ourselves, that we're equally capable of hurting somebody as another person is of hurting ourselves. We can't hold that truth about ourselves. That's too hard to hold if we're sitting in fight, flight, and particularly in freeze.
Yeah.
Freeze is such a shame-inducing state that if we were to encounter that truth, that we're capable of hurting another person as much as they have wounded us, we would never get out of freeze.
Yeah.
Right? So the only way we can arrive at that truth is when we're in safe and social, and then we're willing and able. We're just able to forgive. We just can.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think of the theory which I subscribe to, philosophy, that there's only one person in the room. We're all one. And so ultimately we just have to forgive ourselves.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's true.
Yeah.
I do. And I don't think that it matters what mechanisms we use to get to that truth. I think the only important thing to say about using that approach, as well as any approach to forgiveness, to be honest, is that there is so much emphasis around bypassing or forgiving before people are ready, forcing forgiveness, also, you know, making it not okay to be angry, making feelings, you know, natural feelings and responses to a hurtful or a frustrating or, you know, or an otherwise provocative event, we have responses to that. And it's okay to be really angry about that.
Yeah.
And as long as we're not in a position where we're trying to bypass all of that and just get to forgiveness, or you know, then it doesn't really matter how we feel about ourselves, because there is an aspect. So the self-forgiveness is about how connected I am to my own vulnerability and my own possibility that I can hurt. And I've always approached the Hoponopono as a personal. So it's always, for me, like, I know that it's very much structured in terms of the other person, but it has always felt to me that ultimately the Hoponopono was about forgiving myself.
Yeah. I did 40 days of Hoponopono as part of a course I did last year.
Mm-hmm.
And they said the instruction was, do it, the Hoponopono, towards somebody who you have the least amount of forgiveness. And that was me.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, I'm quite good. I think I'm good at forgiving other people, but I was still carrying around a lot of lack of forgiveness towards myself.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 40 days and 40 nights. Well, and I had, you know, a mala bead thing. So before I went to bed, I did it 108 times. Is it? I think it's from memory. And it felt good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It does. It shifts your vibration, and obviously there's quite a high vibration associated, or frequency associated, with forgiveness. And, you know, as you say, it's all the same energy. It's all the same experience. And yes, we are individual humans on a 3D level, but our energetic experiences are really very much connected to each other.
Yeah.
And that's why we keep attracting, like I said, you know, that whole sequence of people who are like another person, because they are. It's an energy that wants to be transformed through us.
Yeah.
So if we think of it, particularly as light workers, and I know some people might not identify with that term, but let's say even sensitive people, we come into the world with an agreement and a vow that we are going to transform energy. And my agreement might be I transform energies 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 21 and 50. And your agreement might be to transform, you know, energies that are, you know, 27, 28, 29, 32 and 17, you know. And so it doesn't really matter what they are. They're just the energies that we said we're going to work with. So, and we feel them as humans as the energy of power over, as opposed to power with, and the energy of shame, or the energy of disappointment, or, you know, the energy of abandonment. But really they're just numbers in the big scheme of the universe. And they're energetics we've agreed to transform. Yeah.
And my method of transforming these energies is to just briefly, I'll ask the client to close their eyes and say they're feeling anger. And I say to them, okay, so just close your eyes. And if you're scanning your body from top to toe, where do you feel the anger?
Yeah.
And then the next step is to let the anger be. Let it take up as much space as it likes. You know, once again, you use the term expansion. So it's not saying, go away, anger. It's, okay, I'm listening. And what I know about the body is that it's always working on our highest good or highest behalf, isn't it? So
it is. It's our best friend, and it's not a lie, and it's not going to tell us untruths.
No. And so the anger is perfectly reasonable, and we need to honor it by listening to it. And that's what I guide the client to.
So one thing you might like to know about is, like, yesterday I was doing some work with a client who, you know, she's been really, really indoctrinated to not show her anger. So really even feeling her anger, or certainly when other people are around. So she's actually got a certain amount of agency when other people are not around. So when she's with herself, she can feel herself. But as soon as she's with other people, she can't actually feel herself.
Wow.
So she can feel all the pain in her body, but she can't feel her boundaries, her emotions as discrete emotion. Like it just, all that stuff of the sense of self goes away. Right? So we've been working kind of like trying to uncover how she hasn't really had a really clear sense of that, even just understanding the difference between she doesn't feel herself when I'm with her so much as when I'm not with her. So we got there yesterday because I asked her to draw just with a colour. I said, just draw a shape and a colour of how you're feeling in that moment. So I didn't ask her to do anything elaborate. I just said, choose a shape, draw a shape, and colour it in any way, shape, in any way you like. And that might be going over the lines. It might be fainting out the lines. It might be using a different colour, whatever. So a very simple process. But after a little while, I think we got to about the fifth shape, and she drew some of her anger. And literally she was into it. After, her third got passed over, she's like, I've got it now, right? And it was literally just kind of like two snarly, grisly teeth that were in red, like all jagged and grisly and whatever. And she had to really kind of work at getting the exact shape right. But once she was able to see the reflection of herself, we were able to really start to then work with her anger. And we work with it in a way that then we could come more embodied again. So, and that was by me asking her if I could come a little bit closer to her, and then asked her if she was still in touch with her feelings of anger.
Right, yeah.
And she lost them. So that was, I stood up and she wasn't able to feel the, the sense of her own anger. So I said, okay, so let me try something else if you don't mind. And I sat back down, and then I leant forward. But I was sitting down quite some distance, but I just leant forward. And she was able to say, oh, I can just feel it a little bit now.
Wow.
So then we were able to play with how she could feel it more and when she felt it less. When it disappeared, so at one point she said it just slid off like mercury and it had gone. So this is the embodiment piece of how, like, some people can't, I mean, she can feel her body, but she can't, on the pain level, but in terms of all those other nuances, she wasn't there. And so what I had to do was ask her to draw it and see it, and then
access it. Yeah. Wow.
It's like, then she could eat it, she could digest it, and then we could work with it. So, the working with the body is not always straightforward, because it depends on how people have set up their, ways of hiding themselves from themselves and from others.
And we're probably all good at that.
Very good at it. Very good at it. And it's based on, and that's what we can come back to, it's based on patterns of protection and survival.
Yeah.
They have to hide certain ways that they feel in order to stay safe. That if she had shown her anger, then there would have been a situation which felt very unsafe for her.
Yeah.
Okay.
And would you say that these patterns are learnt between the ages of 0 and 7 or not?
Usually I would say so, yeah. Yeah, definitely, yeah. So in her case, there was a lot of shame-based patterning. So every time she had a feeling that was not approved of or not wanted by her family, she was shamed, right? So there's a lot of shame-based patterning. Now, shame, you can probably start shaming a child from around the age of 2 quite easily, So, I mean, and yeah, and I mean, that's when you actually start building a character, a personality that's really resistant to being helped by others. If you repeatedly shame somebody from a really early age, they actually develop such a thick pattern of protection that they won't or don't, it feels very unsafe for them to allow anybody in to help them.
Oh, gee, that's
So then they're
isolating.
actually, then they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I mean, a lot of us see that kind of patterning in therapy, you know, or not just in therapy, but in a therapeutic situation, right? Where you've got these people who are like, they want help, but they don't want to let you in to help them.
Yeah, because they're guarded. Yeah.
They're super guarded. And it's because they were shamed. And so then it becomes all caught up in, if I ask for help, it's not only just the asking for help that's shameful, it's the process of being helped. I'll be shamed in that process too.
Oh,
Yeah.
so they're guessing that they'll be shamed, right? Or
Yeah.
predicting it.
Because they don't know enough, for
Yeah.
example. You didn't know that, did you, about yourself, for example? That's what their internal head is saying, that the person's going to say, oh, you didn't know how to feel yourself, did you, for example?
Yeah, right.
That's what they're expecting, you know, or their 2-year-old is expecting. They're not actually expecting me to say that, but it doesn't really matter what I say. That's how some internal aspect of themselves will receive that information if it's not done really, really gently.
Yeah.
You know, because that's actually, you're talking to this horribly wounded, shamed child, you know, that also has these amazing, you know, beautiful gifts, but they're being kind of held back by shame, which is the freeze state, which is the closest thing that we have to death, you know. Like, it feels horrible to be pushed into shame is the thing that we as humans will most avoid.
Really?
Yes. So
Wow.
we will tolerate the charge of the sympathetic nervous system, albeit we may not like it. We will tolerate it. We will enjoy, hopefully, you know, social engagement system, but we really will try to do everything we can to avoid the pattern of freeze until it becomes a pattern that we just slide into by accident.
Right.
So if somebody's permanently stuck in freeze, their nervous system just takes over in a way that just has that is biologically not at all safe for them. But they can just disappear at that point, and they can lose sense of what safety is.
And did you say shame was stuck in freeze?
Yes, and so shame and freezing don't have to be, but they usually are together.
Oh, okay. Fascinating.
So sometimes people will say they're feeling shame, and you can actually help them notice that it's just freeze.
And
Sometimes.
if somebody's experiencing freeze, that would alert you to potentially mean that they're experiencing shame?
And vice versa.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but say you don't have to experience shame when you go into freeze, but they tend to, they're both what we call inhibitory systems. So they inhibit the body. So that means they just like each other. They're like two cells that kind of join, you know, two molecules that join on a, you know, a chain. And they're like, oh, shame and freeze, lovely, good friends, you know.
Yeah.
So my job really is to try and help people tease away from the two, so that then they can safely be in freeze without feeling shame. And once you do that, then you can navigate your way out of freeze. Because the reason you can't navigate your way out of freeze when shame is coupled with it is because the minute you start navigating your way out of freeze, you start to feel something, and what you feel first is the shame.
And it feels unsafe, so you retreat.
It's so horrible that you go back into the freeze.
Yeah, I can see that.
Uncouple the two first, if they're there, to help the person out of freeze.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for explaining it like that. Illuminating.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I guess we've kind of like danced all around forgiveness, but I think we've I guess that's one of the reasons why people can't move into a state of forgiveness, right? Would be the shame around an event, around what they might have contributed to that event, right? What they didn't do.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so the things that they didn't do or how they might have contributed to it might keep them in freeze and away from safe and social. So So again, there's another completion thing. It's like, well, what needs to happen? What do you need to feel or notice about yourself, right? So there's a whole, you've got to take them through the stages of what didn't happen and what needs to happen to get them to safe and social.
Would you say that shame is closely tied to hurt, feeling hurt, or not?
No, I wouldn't actually. Hurt is much more. Well, no, okay. So I would say that hurt, people drop into hurt when they've hit a sympathetic charge, and that's too hard for them to hold. So when they've got a bit of fight or flight energy and they don't know what to do with it because there's a lot more charge, they tend to drop into hurt, which is not freeze, but it's also what it's doing is diluting the sympathetic energy. It is numbing it. I think it's more diluting it, because then what happens is that people cry, and tears of release is still in the sympathetic zone. It's just at the very bottom of the sympathetic zone. So what you're really trying to do is validate the tears as well as notice the activation, so that they don't drop into any kind of collapse. So it's like, being able to, really validate the hurt and the tears, and wow, this has really hurt you. And, and I can imagine that you can probably still feel some of that blood moving through your body. I imagine you can still probably feel the energy of that. And you don't want to drop them, let them slide into freeze, because then you're going to get them all the way back out into safe and social again. So the nervous system is really a hierarchical ladder. That would be the best way to really finish this piece, I think, is to say, at the bottom of the ladder is freeze. A step above that is the sympathetic nervous system, and so that involves both fight and flight. And as I said, tears of release would sit at the very bottom of that rung. And then above that rung, that's the safe and social rung. That's the ventral vagal. So when you end up in freeze and you need to be in ventral vagal, there is only one direction, and inevitably you must pass through sympathetic to get there. So that's what most people don't want to do when they hit freeze. They want to jump straight from freeze to ventral vagal, to safe and social. That's the bypass. Right? Because they actually have to go through sympathetic, which is the anger, which is the outrage, which is, the protection, whatever it is, the fury, the tears, the ranting, the grief, it's not fair, whatever. They have to go through all of that. I hate you and I don't know why I should have to do all this work myself.
Bastard.
Why can't they do their piece? Why can't they be accountable? All those sorts of, all the whys, right? You have to go through that to be able to get to safe and social. You can't bypass those feelings. So you have to actually be ready to hold the charge that happens in the body, and the activation that happens in the body when all those feelings are coming in. And that's why you do the nervous system work piece, is like capacity work, is how much capacity do they have to hold their own charge states, which is their own rage or fury or anything else.
Great. I'm going to try and put that in a diagram. And if I can run that past you, then you tell me if I've got it right or not. Because I think I'm very visual and I'd like to see it and refer to it. Well,
I have a nervous, because after you did the course, Anna, I introduced a couple of modules around mapping your own nervous system. And I actually have a nervous system map.
Could you?
How about I send that to you? And you can potentially even offer that to your the people who are watching or listening or whatever, or you can make a modification that if you feel is suitable.
And put your name on it, and
it's copyrighted to me and all that sort of stuff.
Perfect. I would love that. The only thing I think if I added to it is just give examples.
Yes.
You put examples like down the bottom. This is where you've got all your anger and your.
So I have a map.
Okay,
I've
perfect.
done my masterclass that has that map.
Oh, fantastic.
So how about I share that with you as a bit of an exclusive?
Yeah.
That's just for your listeners as well.
Oh, yeah.
So they can access what they would normally have to access if they did a masterclass with me.
Oh, thank you. Bonus.
Yeah, bonus.
If people would like to be in touch with you,
Yeah.
Raquel Dubois.
It's actually embodiedpresencetraining.com. Yeah. I mean, the other one works as well because I keep both. But embodiedpresencetraining.com is the main website. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I really loved our conversation. Thank you.